Thank you, Julianne, and thank you for coming, and those on Zoom. Today we are, I don't need this one. Today we are fortunate to have an expert on blueberries with us, Dr. Patricio Munoz, who's an associate professor leading the blueberry breeding and genomics program at the University of Florida Horticultural Science Department. And recently, he was named the endowed chair for horticultural crop breeding. His research consists of improving the cultivars, which I suppose means the varieties with a local focus and a global impact. And he's developing and implementing tools to accelerate the breeding process, emphasizing outcrossing polyploid species such as blueberries. He has released or collaborated with the release of 14 blueberry varieties, 4 forage varieties, and 7 turf grass varieties. Currently, he's working to develop low chilling requirements for blueberries. No, I'm sorry. Currently, he's working to develop low chilling requirement blueberries with better flavor and traits to enhance their consumption. And he's still working on traditional crop traits that will help producers stay competitive. So please welcome Patricio Munoz.
So, yes. Thank you, Pushpa, for, yes.
I forgot to mention he's brought samples.
That's the way I get you, right? So now people is going to start coming in. So thank you for the introduction, Pushpa. I really appreciate that. And thank you for the invitation. So I have a lot of things, a lot of slides and a lot of stories I can tell you today. So we'll see how, what direction we go together, right? So depending on what you guys are interested. So I will propose that I'm gonna go very fast in some of the areas, and later, you know, we leave good amount of space for question and discussions at the end, you know, so then we make it more interesting for what you guys are interested and know what I just have to tell you here. So, you know, we have an issue that, we don't have enough fruit consumption in the US, you know, in the country. And that's a problem because fruit consumption, fruit and vegetable consumption, you know, is a good indicator of health. It brings a lot of health benefit. And one of the goals of my program, as you're gonna see, you know, through the slides, is to increase consumption of blueberries, exactly because of the problem I was telling you before. Okay, let's see if this now is not working. We just need a click. Yeah, we need a click. There you go. So I'm going to be presenting a lot of things here, but I just want to tell you that obviously everything that I do and we do in the university, there is a large team of people involved, students, PhDs, postdocs, master's students, and also people that help us. In my program, we do 2 things. You know, we develop cultivars of varieties with superior traits, with the focus of local focus. We are the land-grant university, after all, and so we help our stakeholders in Florida, but we have a global impact with the work that we have been doing, as I'm going to show you in a second. Our research, you know, doing breeding, especially plant breeding with perennial crops, so fruit tree crops, is a very slow process that can take very long time. So the research part of my program is to do that faster, cheaper, and more accurate. So I have, again, a lot of things I'm going to be telling you, but I mean, generally it's going to go like this. We're going to be talking about production of blueberries and then market, our program, how breeding works, more or less, different methods that we use in plant breeding, some of the traits that we are interested, and then also some future and conclusions and discussions, okay? Now, one of the good things I was mentioning at the beginning that, you know, consumption is low on fruit and vegetables. The good things in the case of blueberries is that consumption per capita in the country is increasing, and it's increasing rapidly. And the main thing that consumption is increasing is because of the many health benefits that blueberries have. And I'll be mentioning that a little bit later. But let's jump right away to the production of blueberries. So people always ask me, hey, I have a few bushes in the backyard, or I want to produce blueberries. So what are the issues my plants are not growing? The main thing that you guys need to do is that the soil needs to be acidic. So basically the pH of the soil needs to be between 4 and 5.5. Something that is not easy to do, we don't find those many soils with that pH. So usually, the farmers, they have to use certain kind of sulfur, for example, to decrease the acidity of the soil, or actually, acidic water. That's what they use to irrigate in order to achieve that. So different ways. And also you need to have a good organic matter in the soil. And then unfortunately here in Florida, always when people tells me what kind of soil we have, I always said, we have sand. We have deep sand and we have shallow sand. Or we have coarse sand or we have fine sand. And so that's, unfortunately, that soil is not very good for blueberries or to grow almost anything. So then we need to amend the soil with some organic matter. In the case of the southeastern US, we have a lot of access to pine bark, because there is a large forestry industry. So then the pine bark is what is used to amend the soil. Also, it's a little bit more acidic, acidifies the soil, and at the same time, provides organic matter in the long term. Like blueberries don't like wet feet, like we say. They don't like to be underwater. So then one of the things, as you see in these pictures, generally, whenever they are planted in this part of the country, at least, then you put them in these planting beds, raised planting beds. So then whenever, because we have a lot of rain here, as you guys know, in Florida, right? So then whenever we get all this rain, the water can drain and then it doesn't stay, otherwise the plant will be dead, right? So this is essential for the Florida conditions. Now, this picture is from Florida, actually. So then, we do have a few freezes during the winter season here. Sometimes, we get 2 or 3. Sometimes we get 15 to 20, right? Depending on the year. These extreme conditions are not going to kill the plant, but they're going to be killing the flowers. And the flowers obviously are essential because from the flower you get a fruit, right? So then, or if there is fruit in the bush, also they're going to be decimated. So then one of the ways that we use here whenever we get a freeze, we use this sprinkle water actually in the bushes. And in that way, exactly as you see there, the bushes get under a cover of ice. And that's very interesting, right? So then under that ice, the temperature of the plant, of the flower, of the berry, is just slightly above 0 degrees, so it doesn't freeze. But outside, it could drop below 0 degrees Celsius, or 28 Fahrenheit. So that's very interesting. And actually the process of freezing and unfreezing, because we keep dropping water during the whole period, it produces around 1 degree Celsius in temperature. That is enough actually to keep the berry warm inside. So that's the way we keep them. Now, when the freeze is too deep, we call it, too cold, you form too much ice, and it's, in some cases, the whole plant will flip, and so that's very detrimental. So the farmers in Florida, especially the central and north part of the state, they need to be very careful in when to choose to actually try to protect the crop, because it could be actually that you could kill the whole farm if you choose to protect the wrong night. So it's better to lose the crop of the year than actually the bush that you have been investing so much to put it in the ground. So obviously, as you guys might notice, if you guys like gardening, any of you, we have many pests and diseases, and then Florida actually is one of the port of entrance of pests and diseases for plants because of all the tourism that we get and all the trading that is done through the, shipping containers right here in Miami, for example, right? And this is a major issue. So then everything that actually, we develop here in Florida, not just for blueberries, it has to be pest and disease resistant. So otherwise, actually, they cannot even make it. right? So that's a very important point. Now, again, some people, they just get one bush sometimes in the, say, let's say Home Depot, the Lowe's, and then you bring it to your house, and then you're not able to make blueberries, and then, well, probably you have two problems. One of them is that you need cross-pollination. So that means that you need another plant for transfer the pollen from one plant to another. Cross-pollination, is an evolutionary, mechanism that the plants have to keep diversity, because actually the berry is not there for us to eat, right? The berry is there just to carry the seed from an evolutionary point of view. So then the nature needs to develop a way actually to keep the diversity and not the diversity not to be detrimental actually for the production of blueberries. So then the other problem probably you do is that you are developing berries, but the birds or the squirrels or the deers are eating them all, right? So you never get to them. So those are potentially the two problems that you can have. Now, blueberries are a cross-pollinated species of crop, like I mentioned before, and they need bees generally to cross-pollinate. They carry the pollen from one plant to another, and that way it pollinates the flower, and then you get the berry, of course. Choosing the cultivar, not using blueberries is important actually in every species. Sometimes you get these catalogs of gardening, but in reality, and then it has many different colors, and then we start looking at colors and everything, but will that plant grow actually in our conditions? That's the question that you need to be asking whenever you are choosing what to put in the ground, right? So blueberries are no different. So then some cultivars that are out there, or some varieties or strain that people will call them, they are just not able to grow under our conditions. And the main issue is that, as I'm going to mention it now, the blueberry was domesticated in the north with a very high chill requirement, which means that they need to have a very long and deep winter in order to produce fruit. And whenever you bring it into Florida, we don't have those conditions. Blueberries can be produced in the open field, in a deciduous system or evergreen. Deciduous means that actually in the winter time, the plant drops the leaves. That's why you see those plants outside sometimes, some of the plants, not all of them, the drop of the leaves in the winter, because that's a mechanism of defense. So then the plant doesn't die whenever it freezes, right? And then also in evergreen, actually the plant doesn't drop the leaves, but you need to have the right conditions for that. So in the south part of the state, we produce blueberries in evergreen production system. That means that they keep the leaves from one year to another through the winter. And in this part of the state, actually, we do it in the deciduous system. So they drop the leaves in the winter. Blueberries can be harvested by hand or by machine. And then our program has been developing machine harvesting blueberries for a long time already. And then just an anecdotal, information for you. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 10% of the whole crop of Florida was harvested by machine. Last year was 20%, and this year we're expected actually is going to be 30%. Why this is beneficial? It's very beneficial for producers because there is a shortage in labor, not just here, everywhere. And then people just don't want to go and pick blueberries. People just don't want to work in the field. So that's a problem. And the labor that there is expensive. So then, we need to try to help our producers so they can make money. Otherwise, there is not going to be blueberries in the supermarket for us to buy. Blueberries can also be grown under tunnels or high tunnels, like I'm showing here. And then they can be grown in the ground in high tunnels, like I'm showing here, as a way to accelerate the ripening of the fruit earlier in the season. The tunnel gets removed here in Florida. In other parts of the world, tunnels, the plastic they don't remove the plastic, but here in Florida we do, because of the storms that we have, from September to November. So, and if a hurricane passes and the tunnel is there, it's going to destroy the whole thing. Now, if you only have the metal, structure there, it's going to be much better, right? So, but it's a lot of labor to do that. And also blueberries can be grown in containers. So this is a production system. It's a lot more intensive. It works very well, but it's very intensive for the producers because you need to keep track of almost every single thing. I mean, you don't have much space of mistakes here. That's the issue. Regarding production, you're gonna see down here, Florida is one of the first. This is a plot that was done, I believe, in 2019. The truth is that, for example, this year in the south part of the state, we start producing in mid-February. And then our season is gonna end probably, by mid-May, more or less. And in that moment, Georgia comes big time and California has started as well. Then, we have North Carolina, New Jersey, Michigan, Oregon, and Washington State. So those are kind of, this plot here is kind of separated into the traditional production areas and then the new production areas. So that's how the seasonality goes in the country. And usually the fruit outside this season is brought from overseas. In Florida, we have around 50 to 60 farms, and that's around 5,400 acres. That's a statistic out of 2020. And actually, we do at the end of every season, we visit every farm in my program, and then we try to find out, what are the good things that happen during the season and what are the bad things. And then that gives us feedback to adjust the research and the way that actually we can help our producers. The major areas of production are here in Alachua County and in Polk County. And then, so basically you guys are very happy, lucky here, because like Pusha was telling me, last weekend she was picking blueberries juice, probably 20 minutes from here. So it's in a strong farm, actually one of the largest producers in Florida. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about history and where blueberries is coming from. I think what I sent in my abstract actually is a fact that is very interesting. We eat a lot of things in our diet, right? And breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But blueberries are one of the very few things that you can eat that actually was domesticated here in this country. There is almost like 3 or 4 things that are eaten globally that they were domesticated here, and blueberry is one of them. So originally blueberries, there is different diversity spots globally of blueberries, and actually the US and the north part of the US is one of them, north part of the country. And then in 1900s, Dr. Coville from the USDA discovered that the reason that the blueberries were not being grown when actually was bringing them from the wild into his garden, it was because he needed acid soils, like I explained you at the very beginning, right? So in that moment, actually, it passed from being a wild species that you can find in the forest to actually being a cultivated one. And that's what I mean when we say the species was domesticated, because that point forward actually happened in 1911. Blueberries could be domesticated and produced at, a larger scale, right? Big help from Elizabeth White, actually a cranberry farmer, the daughter of a cranberry farmer in New Jersey, that actually worked with Dr. Coville actually to develop the first blueberries. And actually they would pay people to go into the forest, and I will say, no, they will compensate if you will bring, larger blueberries from the forest. And they will pay you more actually if you bring them back where the original plant was in the field. And if they will take cuttings, so they will bring that plant into cultivation, and they develop actually a cultivar, probably the first 5 or 6 cultivars were actually wild blueberries that brought from the wild. And the name of those cultivars or that variety, it will be the name of the person that actually brought it from the wild. And actually yesterday I was just reading, in a magazine, that one cultivar that I always knew that was Rubble, is one of the first one ever. It came from the name Rob, I think, and Leek was the last name of the person, but Elizabeth White thought that name will not be catchy. So then he put the first name with the first initial of the last name actually to make Rubble. And a very successful cultivar. So a lot of wild cultivation, a species brought from the wild, and then basically they develop the first varieties. So that's where it more or less it happens, of course. Unfortunately for us in Florida in those times, blueberries could not be grown. Those blueberries could not be grown in the South, right? And especially in Florida. Why? Mainly because, as you might imagine, here in the North, we have big, long winters, right? Very deep, cold winters. And in Florida, that doesn't happen. So whenever you bring those blueberries that were originally domesticated in the North into Florida, they will not grow, right? So they will not produce fruit. Fortunately for us, we have other researchers here at the University of Florida and the USDA, Dr. Ralph Sharp and Dr. Wayne Sherman, and with Dr. George Darrow from the USDA. They worked together here at the University of Florida, started in 1950, to cross these species from the north with a high winter requirement, if you want to call it like that, right? With some native species from Florida that have very tiny berries, very tiny bushes, but they will grow in the conditions that we have here. And that's how, the varietal type that we work out today, we work in our program today, was born actually, and we call it the Southern High Bush blueberry, right? So this is derived from the originally domesticated blueberry from the north, with crosses not only from one species, but many different species. They are native from Florida. We have around 9 species, depending on who do you ask, around 9 different species that are native to Florida. So in that moment, the first crosses of pollen and flowers from these 2 different species happened in 1951, but the first variety or cultivar was developed in 1976. It took a very long time actually to develop the first one. And in that moment, Dr. Sharp, what he didn't realize that actually was not just bringing blueberries to Florida, but it was bringing blueberries to the whole South. And even more impactful, what he did, and this is another way to see it, in a timeline, in that moment when it happened, the first cultivar in the 70s, many more follow. And nowadays, the University of Florida has released more than 60 cultivars directly, and more than, this number should be probably 60 nowadays, working with different companies globally. So what Dr. Sharp did in that moment in reality was not just develop blueberries just for Florida, but actually develop a whole industry globally. Now blueberries could be grown in low winter areas, so tropical and subtropical part of the world in reality. I like to say, I imagine you all know Gatorade, right? And that Gatorade was invented at the University of Florida, by one professor. And nowadays Gatorade is consumed globally. And everybody knows Gatorade, right? This is the Gatorade of the plants, basically, right? Nowadays it's consumed globally, and it's estimated that 40% of the total blueberries that are eaten globally, it comes from the development that Dr. Sharp did originally here in the University of Florida. Very impactful, right? So I just want to show you a few of the cultivars that we have released, or the varieties that we have released lately. And even a pink one, and actually what I brought a mix up in one of the bags today, and then you're gonna see some pinks. They are not unripe, actually they are supposed to be pink, yellowish, and you can try them, actually they are very good. Potentially they're gonna go in a premium package. And this one also, I think I brought some of those ones, one variety that we just released last year. People always tells me, it's like, yes, your blueberries are so good, and in the supermarket, they're not that good. The reason is that blueberries, it take a couple of years to establish, and then they produce for around 10 years. So even when we come with a new variety, the farmers are not going to just replace them from one day to another, because, there is a lot of investment put into that farm, right? And they need to make money in order to make it, right? So it's going to take a while, but I think with all the work that we are doing, let me tell you that probably in 5 years, every blueberry that you take in Florida is probably going to be much better. So let's discuss a little bit more about breeding and how this developing of varieties or cultivars happen, right? So usually I start by us putting a field trial, basically an experiment in the field with many different potential individuals that could become a cultivar. We observe the different characteristics. We call this a quantitative trait. I'm not going to go into the details of that. In the past, there were usual visual evaluation. Basically, you look at how the plant is doing, the vigor, the tall, how the berry is, if it's large, if it's sweet, and all these different things. And then after that, you select which individuals they should be used as parents. And then basically in that moment, we put the pollen from one flower with the female of the another flower, and we develop a whole new cohort, a whole new progeny out of that. And then basically we continue with the cycle. Whenever we do this many different rounds, eventually you get to one of them that has the cultivar quality. What does it mean to have the cultivar quality of the variety quality? It has, the productivity that will make the farmer, make money, so keep going. And then it has the characteristic of fruit, size, sweetness, and, an appearance that makes the consumer like the fruit as well. So that's kind of, now this is the process of, this is what is called recurrent selection or recurrent phenotypic selection. Is one of the most used plant breeding techniques, not just in blueberries, but in many different species, right? It works very well. This is another way to put it, and with photographies. As you see, these photos were taken in COVID time. But basically in this moment, Werner, which is working our program, is pollinating one flower with the pollen from another individual. Like he's doing the work of the bees, basically, So it's, we should dress them in stripes, right? So that will be more evident. After that, we extract the berries, we extract the seeds out of these berries, and we germinate those seedlings. Basically, each of these little plants here it came from one seed out of the blueberries. And then out of those, we select the ones that we're going to be, growing larger in the greenhouse for eventually plant them in the field. And out of these ones, we keep selecting them, throwing away the ones that they don't have the characteristics. And eventually, the winners we planted in pre-commercial and commercial farms, right? And in that way, we get to select a cultivar. Now, this is a chart here of almost every variety that was released all the way from the original ones. There is rubble, the one that I was telling you at the very beginning, right? And this is the firmness of the fruit. Because you guys don't want to eat a mushy blueberry, right? So many breeding programs, and the ones in red are the ones that are growing in the north, and the ones in blue are the ones that are grown in the south, right? And as you see, through history, starting from 1910 now to 2017, where this plot was made, the fruit firmness has been increasing. Why? Because it's an essential trait for shipping the fruit from different places. But at the same time, again, like I mentioned before, consumers don't want to eat fruit that is mushy and soft, right? So these traditional techniques that I was showing you before, they work very well, but they are very slow. 15 years or even longer to develop a new variety. And that's problematic because the farmers, they need a new variety yesterday. And so we need to work faster. And that's why all my research is about doing this process a lot faster. So another way that we can use the same methodologies, actually, the process is the same, but sometimes now, not sometimes, this is one of the ways that we actually measure those characters. We quantify them, and we use statistical methodologies to obtain parameters that are informative for us, and also it helps us to rank the cultivars or the varieties and which one we should be used as parents, and do exactly the same thing, but more informed. So that's another way that we have to do nowadays. So this is what we have been using already for a while. And actually, there is another methodology that we use that in this case, we obtain the molecular markers or the genotypic information of each plant that we are using. And then we also obtain the same parameters. We continue with the same cycle, but usually with these methodologies, we can do the development of varieties faster. Why? Because we can choose much better which of the two parents that we need to be crossing. We can also identify, for example, you see sometimes in the newspaper, there is a new gene that it was discovered for certain disease, right? So the classical example, that I want to explain how this relate to us is, for example, the case of the BRCA gene for the cancer, breast cancer, and the case of, for example, Angelina Jolie, that she was a carrier of the gene that she has a high probability of developing breast cancer, so she decided to remove her breast and, have implants instead. Because the probability of getting breast cancer was too high, and then obviously that could go very wrong after that. We can do exactly the same thing with plants, right? So we can identify what genes control certain characteristics, and then we can decide, if this individual should move forward in the advanced stages of selection, or we can just throw it away if it's not gonna have the right things, right? In that way, these are the different chromosomes of the plants, and then we have identified many characteristics that help us to make the process of breeding or developing varieties more accurate. Research that we did some time ago, kind of putting all these things together, and that we are very happy with is, we have thousands of varieties in the field. Actually on Monday, I spent 7 hours in the field tasting all kind of blueberries. And just yesterday, I spent another 5 hours. So that's kind of my work, So people tell me that they pay me to eat blueberries. But no, they pay me to do a lot more than that. But in reality, we taste a lot of blueberries that are very aromatic. And always we're wondering as researchers, can consumers actually detect the same things that we do, that they are more specialized, that we're experts supposedly? So we did some tasting panels, and we had 2 groups of blueberries. One of them were aromatics, and one of them were just traditional blueberries, right? And the consumers actually were able to detect the difference. And then the second question that we ask is like, do they like them more? And they like them more, And then we brought that into the lab, and the question was like, can we find out what are the chemical components, naturally occurring chemical components in blueberries that are giving this aromaticity to the blueberries? And the answer was yes. And, so there is a set of terpenoids, these are naturally occurring, chemicals in the blueberries that give aromaticity to the blueberries, and people like them. And obviously, like in my lab, is like, can we predict that? Because that's what we focus the most, given that we are trying to choose which parents we need to use for the future, right? And the answer is also yes. So nowadays we have a big line of research that we are trying to develop more and more blueberries that are aromatic, because we know that people like them. And in that way, we fulfill the goal that I told you at the beginning, to increase blueberry consumption. Another way that people, I know that people gets very scary when we start talking about, genetic transformation or gene editing, but this is a reality. It's used in humans nowadays to detect, there is a very interesting case that happened a few years ago of a little girl that had leukemia, and that actually they were able to use this technology actually to save her from the disease. So we can also use it in plants. Now, in these cases, in most of the cases that were this methodology, you might hear about many, many different things about this technology, but the most useful and the more practical thing to use is just get in there and shut down, basically turn off a gene. For example, imagine the case, again, we go back to the case of Angelina Jolie. If you can just go back down there and, and just turn off that gene. And basically nothing else changed. The person is exactly the same, but you just turn off that gene that actually causes potentially a disease, or, causes some problems. And probably the most direct application, again, is pests and diseases, to make the plants resistant, because it's one of the biggest issues that we deal with. Another way that we, nowadays, as you might know, technology is in everywhere, So another way that we use is actually to develop technology, for example, to predict the number of blueberries that we have in the bush. And then in that way, we can be more accurate to develop blueberries that they have higher productivity for the producers. And to develop, equipment in the lab that they can measure all the characteristics that we need for the consumer to enjoy the blueberries. This is more or less how our program works. I know it's very complex, but if you follow me, we do 100 to 150 crosses of different individuals in the program. And then basically we establish every single year 20 potential varieties in the field. And then after the first year, we taste the fruit and we throw away 18,000 of those because they don't have the characteristics that the consumer will like. After that, we moved 200 to pre-commercial, 20 to commercial, and then out of all this process of 20,000, we usually release one variety to the commercial, farmers, and then that's what usually you eat in the supermarket. Important thing regarding consumers, we know that consumers are willing to pay for flavor, for liking, and we all do that. There is a reason that when you go sometimes to the best restaurant, right? Or you pick that dish that you're gonna enjoy the most, right? And also in the supermarket, there is premium products and the other ones use standard. So then sometimes you choose those ones. Texture, as I mentioned before, also is very important. So we have the liking of the fruit here in the tasting panels and the texture. So we know that better texture, firmer blueberries, crunchy blueberries are liked more by consumers. We do a lot of research in flavor in our lab because, again, if you want to increase blueberry consumption, you need to know very well how people perceive, flavor. And actually, flavor is perceived in two parts. In the tongue, we have some sensors that is going to sense all these things right here. And then we have all the volatile organic compounds, which are naturally occurring chemicals in the food, not just in the blueberries. In general, even when I'm drinking this coffee, there is some organic volatile compounds that are going to come through the back of my mouth, and then it's going to hit these sensors that we have in the base of our brain. And actually, it's going to give a different flavor whenever these ones are not working. And one example of that is whenever you guys get a cold, or you got COVID maybe, and then you couldn't smell very well, and the food was tasting funny, right? And it's because actually half of the flavor was not there, right? So anyway, so we have developed in the lab what we call the flavor wheel. So we can identify all these components, and then we can identify what perception you're going to have when you eat these different compounds. And we have done the work to identify that actually, these components are more important than just sugar and acids, which has been the traditional work in blueberries. Blueberries are a superfruit. You know that, right? You know that you should be eating blueberries every day, You don't need to eat a lot, but you need to eat them every day. And that's the way that actually you harness the superfood characteristic of blueberries. Now, they are good for many different things, but the more important and the one that is the most studied are the anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are antioxidants, right? And anthocyanins, you can relate anthocyanins to fruit or vegetables actually that have blue or purplish color. And actually there is anthocyanins in the wine too, right? In red wine. But obviously have a secondary effect that makes you a little dizzy, right? Well, blueberries do not. So they have only positive things. So dozens and dozens of studies done all the time to prove, what are the best characteristics. What are the good characteristics of blueberries or antioxidants for humans. There is so many, and every year, we get more and more. Why? Because every cell in our body is oxidating, right? And then the free radicals, basically the antioxidant food that you eat is fighting these free radicals that they are oxidating every cell in your body. And so the many characteristics of, anti-diabetes, anti-cancer, the neuroprotection. Why is so many parts of the body? Because these processes are happening in every single cell of your body, right? Among the fruit and vegetables that carry this purple or reddish or blue color, blueberries are one of the highest carriers of anthocyanins, which are, again, are going to provide all this health benefit. A different way to see it, there is many clinical studies that they say that, anthocyanins are going to be helping you. Now, if you use track this line here and you say, I want to hit, benefits across all the clinical studies that have been done in the past, actually you need around 300 milligrams of anthocyanins per day. That's a little bit too high regarding the current cultivars that exist, the current varieties that exist in the market nowadays. But in my lab, we are working actually to make a reality that in the future you eat a handful of blueberries per day and you are able to hit all these benefits. It's going to take us a while, but we're in the right track. Other methodologies that we use in the program, and these ones here for artificial intelligence and some of the ones that are very cool. Remember that I told you that we do a lot of tasting panels. One of the problems that we have with that is people doesn't know what they want. We never know what we want, right? So you go to the restaurant, you pick a menu, and then there's like, oh yes, I can eat that. That will make me happy. I'm like, wait, I can eat this other thing too. And then you say, okay, I'm gonna eat this one. And actually, no, at the end, you didn't select any of those ones and you selected a fourth or a fifth one, right? And it still make you happy. But it's very difficult for people actually to fill surveys and to tell us what they want. So actually one way that we are using this in some of the tasting panels, we are giving blueberries to people and then basically their face expression, we can collect if they are liking it or not. And then that's what we are using now with in our tasting panels. In this time of the year, we run, probably 2 tasting panels per week at the University of Florida. And obviously all the people that is doing this approve us, are allowing us to actually record their face, what they are eating, so then we can adjust our models even better. Another of the ways that we have been using with these tasting panels across, now we have 12 years of tasting panels, is actually to look at the characteristics of blueberries, for example, the size or the acidity or the amount of sugar, and trying to find out what is the sweet spot, what is people enjoy the most. So then that kind of give us a north, give us a goal, and then we try to hit those targets with the new varieties. There is more than 500 species of blueberries, or vaccinium, which is the genus name. There is only 26 that have been used so far to develop, the blueberries that we eat today. Actually, the blueberries that we eat today, there is only 4. And there is 26 that have been studied. There is blueberries that they are actually orange, like you see there, and they have never been exploited. So that's another big area that we have in our program to try to understand a little bit more of this diversity and bring potential new products. Who knows, maybe in these orange blueberries, there is some health benefits that can help us even more, right? But this is the research of the future. And it's very complicated, but we'll make there one day. A part of what we do, we have developed this fun application to help the growers with scouting, pests and diseases, or to put all the characteristics of the varieties that we develop, like, there is the variety and all the fruit and yield characteristics. And this is a work effort that we do, obviously, not just my lab, but then other labs at the university. But that's the way that we achieve the purpose of being a land grant and then helping our stakeholders in Florida. I think with that, I will say, stay healthy and eat blueberries because they are good for you. And then I think I'll be happy to take any question that you might have for me. Again, I went very fast, a lot of things, but we can have some discussion. Thank you.
I have to say, when I went blueberry picking so on Sunday, they did have the pink ones. They call them pinks.
Pinks, yeah.
Yeah, so I asked, what is that fruit? And he said, they're blueberries. I said, they're pink. They said, taste them. And
You
they
like
were
them?
Sweeter. They were sweeter than the regular blueberries.
And
Yeah.
crunchy, right?
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
sweeter and more expensive. And so we said, well, we'll try to pick them. And he said, they're not yet ready for picking.
Yes.
So I don't know, they come in later or something.
Yeah, those were developed by our lab.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Glad
but
that you
was
like them.
Strange to see. No, they were sweeter. I was
I have a very
surprised.
few in there in the bag. I'm gonna show you later. So then
Yeah.
we'll see how you guys like it.
Okay. Questions?
In another life, and this probably goes back 35 years ago, we had a developer client here in Gainesville that had some excess land, and he experimented with IFAS and growing blueberries. One of the goals, since we're very early in our production of blueberries, is that these blueberries are very, very valuable for export. Is that still the case?
You say 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, so since then, almost every month of the year, there is high supplies of blueberries globally now. So yes, and then, in the past, and then my predecessors, they were just trying to make blueberries, right? So I always say round and blue, and the prices were high, right? Nowadays, there is a lot more competition. And then actually one of the reasons that we do focus a lot in consumers, because consumers, they should like what we do. Otherwise, they're not going to pull the string for the farmer, and the farmer is not going to pull the string to the nursery, and and so on and so forth. So competition is a lot higher as well today. So then we need to do better for our producers here in Florida. So that's the reason. So we still have kind of a window where the price is a little bit better, and the blueberries from Florida, they are the first of the season of the country. So then they are paid better. But it's not what it used to be in the past. In the past, in those years, probably they were gold. So,
Can I have one other question? Does the farmer start with a seed to grow the bush, or is he, and if that's the case, how long does it take before the bush becomes productive?
so so the farmers actually, so whenever the program develops a new variety, is licensed to the nurseries. And the nurseries, so you give them cuttings, and then basically, they produce thousands or millions, and then they sell those to the farmers. And then the farmers basically start with a plant that they actually plant, usually around this size or maybe this size, depending on what you are willing to pay, right? So then there is smaller plants that are going to be cheaper and larger plants. And then in the past, they will take maybe 2 years to get a decent, a little fruit in reality. Through the years, the program has been developed them to be more precautious. So now in 1 year already, you can get some fruit. Again, with the idea that the farmer, money today is worth more than money in the future, right? So that's the idea. So yeah, the plants from the nurseries in reality.
There's a question on Zoom. What is the best way to freeze blueberries for use later in the year?
Ooh, so it's not my area of expertise, but I have an answer for you. So because I heard somebody talking about this in the past. So basically you wash them, and then you put it in a single layer, and you try to do individual very freezing, and then you put them after that in a bag or in a box or in a plastic or whatever. So then each of the berries are going to be individually freeze. And actually, there is a industrial process that they freeze individual berries that you can actually buy in the supermarket. Now, if you want to freeze your own, I will recommend that. Wash them and then try to dry them and then freeze them individually. One cool fact, so then blueberries, if you make a smoothie, it's not going to be blue. It's not going to be purple. But if you freeze them first and then you make the smoothie, it's going to be very purple. Now, the anthocyanins in both cases are still there, which gives a purple color. It's just that in one case, they are still bind to the skin. And in the second case, whenever you freeze them, you break them out from the skin, and now they are released in the juice or the smoothie.
That's interesting. I've never had blueberries last long enough to freeze, but at the time, this was several years ago, we were taught to put them like on a cookie sheet, but don't wash them. You wash them after you take them out frozen. So that's not my question. No.
Okay.
How long is each bush productive? Like if it starts in February, how many months or whatever will a bush produce?
Yep, that's an interesting question. So remember that we have two production systems, the one in the south, Evergreen, usually is a longer season, so they start in probably in February, but still they end up kind of around now or maybe one more week, right? Now, while the production system that we have here in the north part of the state is going to start usually the last week of March and still is going to end up by May 15, more or less. Now, there is still going to be blueberries in the bushes, right? So then, and usually that's the best time to go, you pick blueberries because prices are going to be good. The berries are going to be very sweet because there's going to be basically the end of the crop. So the less blueberries there are in the plant, the sweeter they're going to be, right? And then usually a lot of farmers, they open their farms for you-pick because they don't want to harvest them anymore because it's not worth it given the prices that they are in the market. Biologically, the plant can still produce maybe for one more month, some of the varieties, but the producers is not enough price in the market for them to keep producing. Now, I will say so, depending again, if you're in the south or if you are here in the north. Now, how long do they last? Around 10 years, the bushes that we grow here in Florida. The ones that they grow in the north, they can last up to 80 years. Why? Because and then you can see, the conditions of Florida are very harsh actually for these plants, right? Very detrimental weather. While in the north, they can last for a very long time.
Do they lose any nutritional value when you freeze them?
That's an excellent question. One of my PhD students is studying what happened with the nutritional value, and by that we means, the antioxidant characteristics, right? And we do find that there is difference depending on the variety, and that's why I was saying that we want to develop some that actually there's only one handful. They are very concentrated, but at the same time, they are stable. Now, all the chemical characteristics of not just blueberries, of any fruit and vegetables is going to be impacted by the environment, right? So if it's hotter, if it's colder, if it has more light, less light. So then, again, as part of the work that we do is try to develop the ones that are more stable. So it could be variability. I don't have a definite answer to you, and I cannot identify which ones will last better. Now, if they are blue, they have anthocyanins, and they are antioxidants, and they are good for you. So that's the thing.
Another question. I have two questions.
Yes.
The first is you said that 40% of the world's blueberries came from the original cultivars from UF. Where do the other 60% come from? That's the first question.
Sure.
The second question is that what does it mean in the supermarket where you see organically produced blueberries? What does that mean?
Sure. So the answer to the first question, and let me just clarify and say that 40% of the global blueberries, they come from the original development, right? Kind of development of this varietal type. It's not the first cultivars, but it's every cultivar has been developed out of the first invention, if you want to say it, right? The other 60% is the northern types, the ones that grow again, because remember that the ones that we work with, they grow in tropical and subtropical part of the world. And then basically then you still have the more temperate with higher, deeper winters. And in those cases, they use the ones that they were originally domesticated in the north part of the country. Your second question regarding organically produced. So producing a different system, I will say, there is still, pesticides and fungicides and still fertilization use, but they are just different. And then, in some countries, organically produced, it means it has very high standards. You can almost not use almost anything. I will say here they are not very high standards, so they still use chemicals. They are just different. And in some cases, and this is my personal opinion for the recording, in some cases, because they are a lot less effective, they have to use even more or more frequent. So in my opinion, is that there is no issue with traditionally produced blueberries. So, but again, that's my personal opinion.
You showed us a beautiful straddling picking machine, but you never told us how it works and whether it's looking at the color of the berries or it just shakes them and takes whatever falls.
This is what I keep telling my colleagues in the technology machine area. Is like, you guys need to do better, because we still use machines that were developed like in the 70s that basically just beat the bush. So this machine, basically, they work with some rods in both sides. So the bush, they are called over the roads, right? So then you have the row of blueberries, and then the machine, imagine if the microphone is the blueberry here bush, the machine goes around the bush, and it has these rods that basically shakes in all directions, right? And as they shake, the blueberry drop in a catching pan that then it gets transported to the bag. Well, brought to the bag, because in all this shaking, little twigs and leaves and stuff, there is a blower that blows the tiny blueberries, the leaves, the twigs and all that. And then the blueberries, they drop into a tray. And in that moment, the blueberries are taken to a packing, facilities. They are dropped into a machine, another machine that actually, they separate the soft from the firm. And it separates, the colors, the ones that have, green or red, they are not mature. And at the same time, in some cases, they separate by size too. And then that's what it gets packed, and then it goes to the supermarket.
There's a question on Zoom which says, I noticed blueberries are getting larger. Is this on purpose?
I personally don't like to just breed or develop just larger blueberries, but what can you do if the consumers is buying them, right? And then is paying more to the supermarket. The supermarkets now wants larger blueberries. The person trading or moving or the marketer, he wants larger blueberries. He tells the farmer he wants larger blueberries. The farmers tell us, we want larger blueberries. What can you do? Fortunately, in the past, larger blueberry was a synonymous of soft. Nowadays, that's not the case. So larger blueberries can also be flavorful. And there is many aspects of why larger blueberries are better for this old chain that I'm talking about. So for the farmer, it's less expensive to pick. So then it pays the pickers by weight, right? So then if a blueberry is larger, it's going to take less blueberries and less movements of the picker actually to make 1 pound of blueberries. Pickers usually they don't want to pick the small blueberries neither. So that's another problem, So then they usually skip them or leave them in the bush, which is detrimental for the production, And then I guess saying in the other end is the consumers are liking them more, they somehow they got convinced by the supermarkets that they are premium and they are paying more money. So then those are kind of the two ends of the equation, but we are making them more flavorful, more firm. So then you will see that hopefully.
Yeah, I remember just a few years ago regarding the freezing question. Just a few years ago, I'd go pick blueberries a lot and then freeze them for the rest of the year.
Yep.
But now I've noticed in the last 2 or 3 years that blueberries are available in the supermarket throughout the year. And there's not much change in the price also. So
That's
doesn't
good
need-
for the
don't
consumers,
need-
right?
Yeah, I don't need to freeze because you get them.
So exactly, so like I show in my slide with the production areas of the country, obviously the major production areas are in the north, large proportion of the blueberries. I mean, just a fact, again, we just in Florida produce 2 to 3% of whole North America. It's very little production compared with the whole rest of the country or the north part of the continent, but it's very valuable, right? Now, as soon as the season is over, Georgia comes and all the other states, and as soon as, Canada is done in the north with the tiny blueberries, right, with the wild blueberries, blueberries start coming from different countries. So basically now you can find blueberries every day of the year in the supermarket. It's an essential thing for increasing consumption too. It's been proven. I mean, research has been done that when a product is every year in the supermarket, the consumption increases.
I have a question, Pushpa.
Yeah.
I've never noticed a fragrance or an aroma on blueberries, and I'm just wondering if something's wrong with me now.
I have not.
That's a good question. It's not actually that's something that you're going to perceive with your nose. It's not orthonasal, but actually it comes from only when you chew in these blueberries. So I might have one that might have a little bit, but they are in development.
You brought different varieties.
I brought a few ones. So if you guys, I mean, if there is no more question, we're going to eat some blueberries.
So we'll taste
Yeah.
and tell you which are better. I have one more question, and that's about birds. Birds eat blueberries, right?
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
they
So
love them.
my question is, when I went blueberry picking, I did not see a single bird in this huge farm. Are they killing the birds, or what are they doing? What's going on there?
There is different deterrent mechanism that the farms are using. You know, I mean, one of the farms where I was yesterday, for example, there is a little golf cart that goes around the farm shooting fireworks across the whole farm. They have sound cannons, you know, that are using compression air. So after a few minutes, they go, "Bam!" And then it's very, very loud actually too. You put some stripes of plastic that, you know, they wiggle, and there is many, many ways. And actually, you know, there's in Florida, there is permits to shoot a certain number of shots. I have no much idea of that, to be honest, but I know that, you know, they not just blueberry farmers, but I mean, hunting and all that is not that you can kill all the birds, but I think there is certain number of shots that you have as a permit per year that you can do.
So they are killing some of the birds.
Some of
Yeah,
the
that's-
birds.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
That's too bad, because
Well,
some
we
years ago-
have one species of bird that is migratorial, that when it passes through here, you know, it could potentially eat all the blueberries in the farms. So it's super, super detrimental. And then there are tiny birds, so they cannot eat a whole berry. That's the worst part. They just go and they pick and make a hole in the berry. So then the farmers cannot
damage the
commercialize it.
fruit. Yeah, I asked one farmer, I said, what do you do about the birds? And this was some years ago. And he said, we just let them come and eat what they want, and whatever is left is for humans.
Most of the cases is like that, where you cannot fight it. With all these different things, is one of the major issues for blueberry production.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
everybody.
Any more questions? Thank you so much. Wonderful. Sorry. Come and taste the blueberries.